Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of LLM News, where I go over some of the most recent and exciting developments in the world of large language models and AI. We're going to start off the announcements with one of the announcements that got or received the most engagement on Twitter, which is the release of GPT-4-o, which is OpenAI's new flagship model, which can reason across audio, vision, and text in real time. O stands for Omni, so this is their new models. Everyone was waiting for a GPT-5. There was a lot of rumor about OpenAI, releasing something like a search engine, a competitor to Google and so forth. But actually what OpenAI did was something really interesting, which I think there is a lot to learn about here. One of the cool things that OpenAI did was to focus on the actual experience that you get from these models. So we know that these models are really great at generating text. They're now multimodal, right? They come with these multimodal capabilities. And so what they did was they basically built a model, right, which is best in class and can support all of these different modalities like text, audio, image, and video, and can generate any combination of these modalities as outputs. This is, I think, an incredible advancement in the world of AI. And not only did they achieve this, they also achieved some remarkable latency as well. Because when you talk about audio, right, there is this latency question, right? So if you have used some of these assistants today, you interact with it, you have to wait for a response from the model. And then once you get the response, then you kind of wait your turn and so forth, right? It can feel broken, that experience. So what OpenAI has done is kind of improve that experience across the board. So now if you look at the demos, right, there's really cool demos here where you can interact, you can interrupt the model and ask questions and have this interaction with it, and the model sort of knows what to respond. It can reason about the interaction, right, that it's having with you. So I think this is the next step in terms of like agents and assistants, right, that can understand and reason across all these modalities. And there's a lot of examples of applications of this as well. You can go through them on your own. One interesting part of this was the evaluation. I think what we can learn from this is that companies are going to start to move away from, just like standard metrics, which really mean nothing. What we want to see is the capabilities in the real world, right? What can these AI systems do? How can they improve systems? How can they improve different applications in different domains, right? And actually solve problems, real world problems. So it goes beyond just simple metrics that you get with some of these popular benchmarks. And you can see that this model, right, it doesn't really stand out in terms of evaluation. I mean, there are other models that are just as competitive as this one. And this wasn't the focus, right? It's very clear that the focus was on building that experience with these models. So that's all I can say, and I wanted to share with this new release. I'm very excited about what OpenAI is doing here and all the commitment that they're putting towards building more personalized experiences with these AI systems. So up next, we have the release from Google DeepMind, their model called VO, which they refer to as their most capable generative video model. So again, we're talking about these advanced AI systems that can generate even videos. This particular model is specialized in generating video, high quality video, and consistent video as well. So you can read about all the details here in this blog post, which I will share the link for description. They go through their main details for this particular announcement. Now, video is your most capable video generation model to date. It generates high quality 1080p resolution videos that can go beyond a minute and in a wide range of cinematic and visual styles. So you can check out some of the videos that it's generating. This reminds me a lot about the recent Sora announcement that OpenAI did a few months back. This is really exceptional generated video. If this is an AI generating a system using this prompt, this is incredible how far we have arrived. And I noticed that they mention potential use of these capabilities in YouTube Shorts. I've started to also experiment a lot with YouTube Shorts. I think is an interesting medium. So I'm very excited to see how these advanced generative models can be used in those settings, right? In those creative type of applications to better tell stories and so forth. You can have effects. You can do all kinds of interesting scenes and so forth that you can generate just via using a prompt. I see there are many examples of these here. They give you controls for filmmaking, which will be exceptional tool for filmmakers. One thing that they mentioned, they call out here, is the consistency across video frames. Because if you have seen these video generation models, there's usually some inconsistency as the video is being generated and as you go throughout the scene. So that's the case with Sora. Even Sora have those kind of issues. So this is something that they have kind of focused on, and how they achieve it. They talk a little bit about that. Now, obviously, this is years of work, right? This is not something that Google DeepMind just came about overnight. It's based on the work of all of these great papers that came out recently or over the past few years, like Imagen Video, Benaki, the Transformer architecture, the Gemini models as well. Not a lot of details, I would say, but at least at a high level, what this model is doing. It's a latent diffusion model, right? You get a compressed video from this model. Then you take a decoder, essentially you output that. But you can see that they're spending a lot more time, as they mentioned here, on higher quality data, right, to improve the performance of those models, right? So having like compressed representations of video, also adding more details to the captions as well, really help in training these models. So that's something that they mentioned here. They also talk about their approach to responsible AI as well. Up next, we have another announcement from Google DeepMind. So recently we had Google I/O. By the way, I went to Google I/O and I saw some of these presentations live. Very exciting what Google is doing, right? Some of their releases. And we're going to cover a few of these announcements in this particular episode. So I'm going to try to do my best and try to summarize as much some of their announcements or their recent announcements and what are my thoughts around that. So one of those projects that was really interesting, that I think was surprising to me, is basically what looks like the response to the GPT-4-o, which was recently released by OpenAI, which we just spoke about, right? So how to build this kind of assistant or agent that operates and can help you achieve tasks in the real world, right, in everyday life. And this is what they have announced with Project Astra. So this includes basically, it's kind of a multimodal system, right? You can interact with the real world. You can basically interpret image. It can interpret your surroundings, reason about your surroundings. You can ask questions. It does feel like something that's very present and that allows you to interact with your environment and ask questions and reason about pretty much anything that you see and that it can capture, whether it be like music, whether it be like videos, whether it be, just like objects and things like that. So this is quite exciting. There was more details about this in some of their blog posts, but that's as much as I want to cover today. That's an exciting project, I think, and there's a lot more work to do, obviously, here. The cool thing is they actually demoed this for Google I/O Live, which was really fascinating. And you can see that this model was great. It can interpret some of the commands, the voice commands. It can interact. It can look at the screen. It can look at videos, do really full-blown analysis of videos as well. And you can see that it really does well with different modalities. But I also saw that the latency was kind of an issue and so forth. It took a little while to create a response or generate a response for some of the parts that they demoed. But overall, I'm very impressed by this. I think this is what we are expecting from these companies now, like a combination of these modalities and creating better experiences and better AI agents that can help us with everyday tasks. Another announcement that was part of Google I/O is the Gemini 1.5 Flash. So this one involves, it's a Gemini model, right? So we have Gemini 1.5 Pro that was released a while back with 1 million context. So this one extends the context as well. So now I believe we have something like 2 million token context window. So this is part of this release, which is 1.5 Pro. And also, they are providing the Flash model as well, which is a lighter weight model than 1.5 Pro and designed to be fast and efficient to serve at scale. That's basically what they're announcing here. And apparently, this will probably unlock even more cooler applications because obviously, this one is a faster and more efficient model. And so, this could potentially be used, for instance, in RAG systems, could be used for building agentic workflows, and so forth. So that's kind of part of their release. You can see here now with Gemini 1.5, the support of 2 million context window, which is incredible. You can see right here, 2-hour videos, 22 hours audio, 60K lines of code, 1.4 million words. That's remarkable that we are here at this time now. And these are great models. And again, they're focusing on speed and efficiency, multimodal reasoning as well, similar to Gemini 1.5 Pro, and then a long context window as well. Up next, I have this really cool post by Andrew Ang, and he talks a little bit about the recent announcements, which is Gemini Pro 1.5, this extension to 2 million tokens, and also the release of OpenAI, which can generate tokens 2x faster and 50% cheaper than GPT-4 Turbo, and natively accepts and generates multimodal tokens. So that's a great summary of what we have been discussing so far. And I like this post because Andrew Ang also not only does he mention some of these announcements, he contextualizes this in terms of like what people are building in the real world. And through different capabilities he's mentioning, which a lot of these providers are focusing on improving, is reasoning and the support for longer input context windows. That's really important. And what kind of applications you can build around that is really what everyone is asking and focusing on today. So the reasoning capability he speaks about here, GPT-4 and other advanced models, makes them quite good at interpreting complex prompts with detailed instructions, whereas that's really an important capability in terms of building agentic workflows, in my opinion. You have access to models that can reason across long data as well, and you can provide them like complex instructions, and they can perform all kinds of tasks, right? So that's really important for developing with large language models, and it's a capability that these companies are focusing on. But he also speaks about increasing the length of input context window and how that's a really important part of like the developer toolkit. Having access to these long context windows, right, can unlock a lot of capabilities as well. You can unlock different applications, right? You can also apply things like many shot learning, where you can give the models like dozens and even hundreds of examples in the prompt, and this leads to better performance compared to something like few shot learning. And again, this also works really nicely or combines really nicely with when you build something like a RAG system or an agentic workflow where you have lots of data that you're analyzing and you're passing to these models as additional context, which is important for those applications. So that's quite exciting, right? These two developments of reasoning on long context window. Something I really like about this particular post is this part right here, which to me makes sense as a developer. I think I'm experiencing the same when I work with companies and I build out use cases with language models. So he says that when building complex workflows, he sees developers getting good results with this particular process. So you write a quick, simple prompt and see how it does, right? So you can use any of the playground provided by these language model providers, and you can quickly assess how your prompt is performing. It just writes something really simple. And based on that, whether the output file is short, flesh out the prompt iteratively, right? So now you're making the prompt more complex, more additional instructions, more information that you're passing into it, and so forth, right? You may be adding more and more context, which could get the prompt to be longer, and that could eventually evolve to something like a mega prompt. If that is still insufficient, consider few shot and many shot learning. So this is adding demonstrations or exemplars into your prompt, which leads, in most cases, to better results. And again, he mentions the concept of many shot learning, which is something that is relatively new and that it's not possible. If that still doesn't yield the results you need, you can break down the task into subtasks and apply an agentic workflow. So this is new, right? Because we know that by simplifying the tasks for these models, we can definitely get better results. This is something I talk about in my prompt engineering course, and we show that that's the case. But what he's suggesting here is to potentially apply something like an agentic workflow, right? Where you might have some kind of loop, right? And that you have defined, or some kind of like control flow, right? Where it goes from this process to the second process to the third process to actually achieve a particular task. If you have all these tasks that you can categorize this, maybe you might be able to get better results by having special agents kind of deal with these tasks, and then at the end you will have the results of all of these agents summarized by maybe a meta agent of sorts. And that's, I think, what he means by this. This is fascinating. One thing he mentions here is the MENT prompt paper. So this one was released by a Google research team. This is really interesting because this talks about prompting strategies, which is something that I post about if you have been following me on Twitter for a long time. He cites this particular paper, which is summarized here in this blog by Microsoft, and it takes you through the different stages or different iterations of prompts that you may go through in building your use cases, right? So something like zero shot, then random few shot, then random few shot chain of thought, then gain and few shot chain of thought. So you're kind of combining different strategies, and that usually leads to really good results in any of the applications that you're working. This is again something we teach in our courses, and we show you how you can get better results on that. Up next, and maybe not entirely related to large language models, but more the AI scene, is this new announcement by Microsoft recently. So this was May the 20th. And they introduced Copilot Plus PCs. This is their new eras of AI-enabled PCs, and they're referring to it as Copilot Plus PC. And you can see there's a lot of details in this announcement. There's a nice summary of what it is in this video. You can check that out. But what I'm noticing with this is that there's a lot of emphasis on like the experiences that you're getting with AI systems today. That's again very related to what OpenAI is doing, right? OpenAI is providing you sort of like an application or assistant, but Microsoft is also a PC company and they're providing you, the entire PC, where it's moving or shifting away from just building the technology, which is all these like transformer models or this vision multimodal models, and enabling real world application or accessibility to these technologies. And that's kind of the trend I see now with this space. And they're focusing on, again, they do announce this to be like a 40 plus trillion operations per second. And I think they claim that this is probably the fastest PC that they have created. And so that's exciting. And but what I found really interesting about this announcement is on powerful AI experiences. So pay attention to this one, AI experiences. The models have become so powerful that now can be used, to enable these richer experiences with technology. And some examples of that they highlight, they even have nice videos. So like it has the ability to recall instantly. So, this machine probably has some memory or knows the tasks that you conduct day to day. And if it has that memory, if it has that extra context, then it might be able to make you more productive on any of the tasks that you're working on. I think that's exciting. I'm very excited about what they're doing there and how that integrates into their operating system and all their applications like Outlook and Teams and so forth. And they also obviously focus on creativity, right? Like the ability to create images and so forth. Videos might also be a thing as well. So for creators, I think this is really interesting development as well. And again, they're talking about innovative AI experiences from the creative apps you love, right? Again, you can see these terms here. And that's really what we're starting to see with all of these companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta, and Google, right? Recently with their Project Astra, integrating these AI systems into applications that you use day to day to develop or create videos, whatever it is that you're creating. So there are some partnerships here with Adobe, DaVinci, CapCut, and so forth. So take a look at this. I think it's interesting just to understand how this space is evolving and sort of what's next after this, right? So we talk about agents being the next thing, but we are already working as an industry in developing even like PCs, right? That are enabled completely by AI. So we might have agents and applications like that, but we might also have, these assistants that are more integrated into the way we interact with technology. Up next, we have two very, I would say, similar announcements. So I wanted to call out this Cat 3D. I think this is one exciting one. You can create anything in 3D with multi-view diffusion models. Again, you can see diffusion models being mentioned here. It was mentioned I believe in the VO announcement as well. But the idea that you can create these type of like images and so forth, it's really amazing, right? Like you can create things in 3D, so you can go from text to 3D, image to 3D, and view to 3D as well. So there are some details about this in their blog post, and there's also a paper about this, and you can see how the process works. So as you have an input image, you have these generated novel views, and then you can obviously optimize and produce a 3D representation that can be rendered interactively. So you can see what the process looks like. Here are some of the results. This is really cool. You can see how this works. You can interact with it. That's really amazing that you can go from like one input image like this into something that, could be used, for instance, for building games and building different like creative assets. So just take a look and read more details on the paper if you are interested. Up next, we have Chameleon. This one is from Meta. So they announced this new model called Chameleon, which is mixed model early fusion foundation models. So I think the idea behind this paper, as you can see with this particular figure here, is that you want to have representation of all modalities, right? And you want to do that in a more efficient and productive way, meaning that you can generate any outputs, you can generate combinations of this ideally, right, which we have seen with GPT4-o. But this one basically takes all modalities and creates representations of those. So you have images, text, code, and represent them as discrete tokens, and then uses a uniform transformer-based architecture that is trained from scratch in an end-to-end fashion on 10 trillion tokens of interleaf mixed model data. So you have all this type of data, right, that it's trained on. This results in a model that can both reason over as well as generate arbitrary mixed model documents. Text tokens are represented in green and image tokens are represented in blue. So you can see how this is the pre-training process, right? You see this is text and this is image and so forth. And then you can see how the images are kind of tokenized as well, as they say. Really, the emphasis of this is how can you build a really good model that can reason over, all of these different modalities. This is, again, what all these companies are focused on, right? We know that these models can generate text, it can be fused, generate text and images and so forth. But the idea that you can build a model that can reason over all these modalities is really what everyone wants to kind of achieve. And I think this is part of that effort as well. This one is, again, coming from Meta, the FAIR team. And I do a comparison with GPT-4v and Gemini Pro. We know Gemini Pro has this capability as well. And they mentioned that they exceed or match the performance of much larger models like these ones, according to human judgments on a new long-form mixed model generation evaluation. So that's why I was saying, right, that this is sort of what Meta is working on, but you have other companies like Google and OpenAI also developing these type of models. This wouldn't be an LLM's review if we didn't have something that has to do with prompts. And this specifically is about evaluation, which is really the best of both worlds. And this particular announcement is from LMSys.org, and they are in charge of the chatbot arena, or the creators of the chatbot arena, and they are introducing what they refer to as hard prompts. So this is really fascinating because one of the things that I continuously mention about these model releases is that we want to see these models applied, to real world tasks and challenges. I think I'm really tired of seeing like companies just report the standard benchmarks, like MMLU and so forth, right? Those are okay and they're important, but I want to see more valuation and assessments on real world tasks, because that will tell me and that will help me as a developer to pick the right model. So I think this is, a good step in that direction. So hard prompts is basically created using, and I think they use the Llama 370B instruct model, which helps to label over 1 million arena prompts on whether certain criteria met. So this is the criteria, and if those prompts met that criteria, then they're added to the hard prompt data set. And those hard prompts are used to evaluate the different models. You can see how these models perform here in the chart, and they're compared with just the English version. So hard prompts English and just the English version. And you can see how these models either improve or deteriorate in terms of that performance. So for instance, GPT-4-o seems to improve, which is what you want to see, right? Obviously, these are harder prompts for the model. But you also see models like Cloud 3 Sonnet kind of deteriorate in performance. This one is even worse, Llama 3 8B instruct and Command R plus as well. That's giving you some insights about these models. This one is interesting. It shows some of the models that have the most notable improvements. So you have the Phi-3 model here. You have the GPT 3.5 Turbo 1106, which everyone sleeps on. I actually use this model a lot for my experiments. So I still use the GPT 3.5 models. They're great at many tasks like code and reasoning and so forth. So, you don't want to disqualify a model if you're not sure whether that model could be useful for your pipeline. So what you want to do is you want to have measurements like this. And this is telling me that, these models have a lot of capability. These models have a lot of potential and can still be useful for when you're building these LLM pipelines. or workflows. I encourage you to take a closer look at how they're building their hard prompts. Microsoft also released their remaining Phi-3 models. So there's a Phi-3 Small 7B, Phi-3 Medium 14B, and then there's also a Phi-3 Vision. I also found this interesting paper that talks about fine-tuning and hallucinations. And what exactly is the effect of fine-tuning of a model on new knowledge and what that encourages? If it encourages hallucination or not, that's really the main question here. And what's the finding? You can see that they show that large language models struggle to acquire new factual knowledge through fine tuning, as fine tuning examples that introduce new knowledge are learned significantly slower than those consistent with the model's knowledge. However, it says we also find that as the examples with new knowledge are eventually learned, they linearly increase the model's tendency to hallucinate, right? So is fine tuning always beneficial? Well, it really depends on the task, right? It depends on the kind of data that you're using for fine tuning as well. What exactly are you fine tuning on? So, this is something to be really careful about. So, taken together, it says our results highlight the risk in introducing new factual knowledge through fine tuning. So, when you're fine tuning, mostly we use fine tuning for fine tuning the model to have a specific style, or we want to see a specific tone generated. That's where we are using fine-tuned models. We rarely use fine-tuned models to acquire new knowledge, but I have heard of cases where, or special cases where you may want to fine-tune a model, for instance, to know specific like product IDs or specific numbers like that. It could be that the model can benefit from that type of knowledge. And so, there might be unique cases like that, but overall, you have to be really careful when we're talking about acquiring new knowledge and whether you're using fine tuning for that. And so it says, and support the view that large language models mostly acquire factual knowledge through pre training, exactly as I was saying, whereas fine tuning teaches them to use it more efficiently. Right. That's basically what I was trying to summarize here. We use it for finding text. For instance, we have an email that we're generating, and the email looks very generic. Let's say we want to refine how those emails are being generated or the style in which they're generated. We can fine tune a model to get some good results on that. And I think this paper talks about that. But they contextualize it in hallucination and how fine tuning can lead to hallucination issues, which again are really hard to explain. How do we end up with different hallucination problems? Well, this paper will give you more insights on that. So please do take a read. Up next, we have this paper, Risks and Opportunities of Open Source Generative AI. So this is by a big group here, and basically they're talking about all the risks, right, and some of the opportunities that you can get from open sourcing these generative AI systems, right? So they go through all the details, right? They do some type of analysis. They talk about regulation. There's so much like application, like the different steps of these models and so forth. So all that context is really important when we talk about the application of AI and open sourcing of this technology. So I really like this report. It goes into all the details, right? There's interesting also information about all the different models in which they have done the analysis on. The good news is that most of these companies like Google and so forth, they're are opening their models, right? And they're doing it in their own unique way with unique licenses. And having access to these models is actually a good thing today because we can see whether these models are actually good for our applications and have a lot of potential there. So, there's a lot of conversation about how to open source models, what kind of licenses, and so forth. But I think the fact that these companies like Microsoft with your Phi models, right? Google with your Gemma models and so forth, and obviously Meta with Llama models, we can learn a lot from these open models. And obviously open source can mean something completely different, but I think that will change, right? What we refer to as open source might change as well. And I have a lot of opinions about that, but I think that would be something I can talk about in another video. Anyways, take a look at this paper. I think it's really cool what they have done here and summarize, kind of making a case for why we should have open source AI and also what could be the potential risk as well. Up next, we have this implementation or open source implementation of Meta's TestGen LLM. So a while back, Meta released this paper called Automated Unit Test Improvement Using LLMs. And basically, they were targeting to build an automated unit test improvement system, right? So automatically generating tests that you would want to implement on your code base. And what this company, Code AI, has done, I've been following their work, and they do a lot of interesting work around code generation use cases. They have open sourced Discover Agent, and they're releasing it, and you can actually access it. It's on GitHub. And if you want more details about that, the CEO, Itamar, actually goes through what this release includes. So you can find the link in the description, and it goes through an introduction of Discover Agent. But basically, what I understood is that they wanted to reproduce that paper and go through the different steps and kind of provide insights into using generative AI or large language models to do automated test generation. And what are the considerations for doing that properly, right? So the questions that you will ask are, does the text compile and run properly? Is it increasing the code coverage, right? And you have to build a pipeline around that. And also asking questions like, how well is the test written? For this is more for evaluation or like manual reviewing of what the model is generating. And basically, what they're introducing that's a little bit new, and I'm excited to see like the newer results that they're getting and some of the details about their methodology. But they're proposing an agent, a system that basically end to end automatically generates these tests, right? And they have all these criteria of how they're evaluating how good those tests are that are being generated, and they use different types of information. You can see in this workflow here, and they're checking obviously if the test passed. They're checking if it increases coverage. If yes, then they update their test suite, and they're doing that end to end in an automatic way without any kind of human intervention or any kind of human review. Obviously human intervention is still can still be used, but it's exciting to see this kind of agentic workflow for something like automatic test generation, and which obviously can save you hours as a developer. And they show their process here, right? You can see at the end, they repeat until code reaches a certain criteria which they have defined, either code coverage threshold met or reach the maximum number of iterations. So this is telling me that it's a system that iterates until it passes some type of threshold or criteria that they have defined. So this is an exciting one, and they talk a little bit about the different prompts that they used and some considerations like using, optimizing the context better, information, and those options are provided. You can provide like documentation or something like that to improve results, and also you can use optimize the prompt as well. You can add something like a fail test section to the prompt to deliver that feedback to them. So this is about giving the language model more context and more feedback to avoid sort of repeating maybe failed tests or something like that that were generated. That's really, really cool. And there are more details here. You can take a look, but that's as much as I will cover for this announcement. If you're interested in code generation, I think you should be following the work or the research that this team is actually producing. Up next, we have this implementation, Llama 3 implemented from scratch. And this is really neat, right? This reminds me of what Karpati does all the time. He has this kind of BP tokenizers that he implements from scratch. And there's a lot of projects that Karpati is implementing. And I like this because they're very educational. And this particular release got popular. It was announced on Hacker News. It was trending also on Twitter as well. It got the attention of Andre as well. And basically, it goes step by step into how to implement Llama 3 from scratch. So you can see it goes through all the code. What I like about this is that it actually goes through the different sections and what that architecture looks like. How I can use this is if I'm studying and learning about these architectures, you can see what are the kind of important components and decisions that are being made here, right? So for instance, let me see if I can find it here. Normalization, right? So you may be curious about, oh, normalization is an important part of the transformer architecture, but what is the normalization about? Then you can kind of dig into this. You maybe use something like ChatGPT to learn more about normalization, but normalization is a really important component of building these architectures. Similarly, you have things like positioning coding, right? And he goes through all the different steps, something like rope as well, that can be used, to try to enable certain capabilities of these models like length support and so forth. And lastly, we have the Phi-3 cookbooks. So I just spoke about the Phi-3 announcements, and they have also released some cookbooks here. Obviously, these are all the results of the Phi-3 models, but how to get started with this particular GitHub repo will give you some more information about that. So if you want to do inference, if you had a quick start with the different providers as well, like Llama, Hugging Face, Azure, LM Studio, and you have like fine tuning of these models, right? And some tips about that. And how do you evaluate these models as well? How do you achieve responsible AI? how you can use something like Prompto with these models and so forth, right? So this is really cool. It's educational mostly, but I think it's becoming a standard now to see cookbooks from these different LLM providers. And that's it for LLM news. I will be doing another LLM news potentially towards the end of the week or the beginning of next week. Thank you for all the support. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you found this interesting. That tells me a lot if you're interested in more content like this. Otherwise, have a really good day.